My presentation will answer the following question, which is what impact has the flow of refugees out of Syria had on the political, economic and social situations of neighboring host countries. As you can see in the picture, these are the main countries that are influenced by this flow of refugees. However, because I don't have enough time, I will just be focusing on Lebanon and Jordan. So moving on, this is a brief outline of how I'm going to structure the presentation. I'll have a main introduction with the argument that is going to be developed throughout the presentation. Then some historical facts regarding the Syrian civil war. And then I will focus on Jordan, Lebanon, and finally brief conclusion. So having said this, the main argument is that refugees out of Syria had a negative impact, not only in economic, but also in social and political situation. So some historical facts. In 2010, Syria was a modern civil society. According to World Bank, it has a rapid economic growth. However, in 2011, the Syrian civil war begins and everything went down. So in 2012, there were some bombing and repression. Then in 2013, is where other countries such as the States joined the fight. Then in 2014, the humanitarian needs increased, but because they were on areas that were difficult to reach, they couldn't support them with the help needed. Then in 2015, Europe felt how the Syrian crisis were affecting their frontiers, their borders, especially Greece suffered and Italy from this flow of refugees. In 2016, because this war started in 2011, it was devastating Syria by the years of war. In 2017, they tried to reach safety and stability, but there's no any solution to the conflict. And well, in 2018, the situation continues just the same. And in this year, Syrian refugees suffer from new hardships, especially in Lebanon, because there's been a lot of floods recently, especially in January. So this is how a little bit of historical facts to understand how the conflict has developed. So another key point regarding Jordan and Lebanon is that neither of these countries have ratified or signed the United Nations Convention relating on the status of refugees, and neither is 1967 protocol. Okay, I'll start by Jordan, focusing on political, economic, and social aspects of how refugees impact these areas. Political, there's been a lot of tensions between the two governments, because the society is divided between those who support Al-Assad government, the Syrian government, and those who support the opposition. Moreover, there's been a deterioration of diplomatic relations, especially since Syrian ambassador were out of Jordan country. Then, as I've said before, because the society is divided into those who support the government and those the opposition, Jordan and other nationalities have joined terrorism groups, which has increased the vulnerability for Jordan to be attacked by terrorists. And finally, there's a political negative externalities, which mean that there's a lot of competition over limited resources. Second of all, in terms of economic, because especially on certain areas of Jordan that had received more refugees, this has implied additional costs for Jordanian government. As we see here, the public debt increased from $18.9 billion in 2011 to billion in 2016, which is quite a lot in such a short period of time. And another key point that this need to be highlighted is that because of the conflict happening in Syria, Jordan has lost its main trading route that connected with Turkey and other European countries. So this route is more expensive than this new route is more expensive than the previous one. In terms of social life, we suppose that because Jordan and Syrian citizens, they share the same language, they share the same religion, so we will think that this is going to be any problem because they speak the same language, they worship the same gods. However, Jordanians really focus on blood, and as here I said, because they are not from the same blood, this is a driver of social discrimination in society. And finally, as I mentioned before, there's a social competition, not only for job opportunities and housing, but also Jordanians women attack Syrian women of stealing their husbands because the dowry that Syrians had is less than the one that Jordanians women had. So moving on to the last country I'm going to talk about is Lebanon, as well in political, economic and social aspects. A very important point is that they have not clear policy implemented regarding Syrian refugees. As you see here, they don't call them refugees, they call them displaced persons. So, because what I've said at the beginning of the presentation, they haven't ratified the United Nations Convention on the status of refugees. So this is why the government has been really, how to say that? They really take care to not call them refugees because they didn't sign the convention, so instead they call displaced persons. And the same as in Jordan, Lebanon had a huge security impact. There's been 29 suicide bombings from 2012 to 2015. Moving on to the economic area, there's a job shortage because Syrian labor force is cheaper than Jordanian, so they are kind of stealing their jobs. They say that Syrians are stealing their jobs. Then the living conditions are also poor. Less are living with $2 per day, and a slower growth, obviously, because they have to invest money on these refugees. The real per capita GDP is they made a drop of 8.3%. So they lost this quantity of money, which is actually high. And finally, social, the same as in Jordanian. However, because Lebanon society is quite divided between, because in Lebanon, as you all know, there's also Christians, there's Muslims, there's a lot of religion in the country. So each of these areas or communities have had a different response. We have the Hezbollah municipalities that adopted the response of the government. Then we have the Sunni areas, which are the most tolerant to the Syrian presence because they feel that they had a duty to help them, the same as they helped them in previous wars. And the Christian areas, which had a mixed response, first of all, they accepted, but as the conflict increased, the response has been to reject Syrian refugees. In health care system, there's been an increase on budget in the healthcare system because now they have to take care of more people, especially Syrian refugees, and as well there's been a 30% increasement in tuberculosis rates, which previously it was almost eradicated. And finally, education, as you see here, in 2016, 2,000 Syrian children were enrolled in a school, which cost 334 million in additional funds for the government. So I'd like to conclude by giving a brief summary of how these two countries have acted, have responded in terms of Syrian refugees. So, as I said before, neither of them have ratified the United Nations Convention, which is this is actually a really important point in relating how to treat them when they go to their countries. So they have both problems in terms of economy, political and social problems. Both suffer from an impact of their economies, as I just said, with the public debt increased since 2011 of 80 billion in Lebanon and 38 billion in Jordan. Both suffer from terrorist attacks, especially Lebanon in the last few years. And both countries have a divided society: those who support the government of al-Assad, Syrian government, and those who support the opposition to the Syrian. So that will be all. Thank you. If you have any questions or doubts, feel free.